Hi everyone, we'll just wait a few minutes for the rest of the attendees to join. So if you have a few seconds, we'll wait. Hi everyone and welcome. We will start the first of a long series of webinars hosted by the LibEd Consortium. My name is Nina Ritter Nielsen and I'm coming from the Danish Technological Institute in Denmark. And this webinar series is hosted by the LibEd Consortium, which is part of the Horizon 2020 funded by EU. We'll have this long session of webinar hosted here in November. So every Tuesday in November at 2 o'clock Central European Time, we will have a webinar of approximately 1 hour. Today's webinar is the first webinar, and this will be about how to become part of the future with printed electronic. Today we have two presenters. We have Zachary Davis from the Danish Technological Institute, and we have Tobias Prinzel from Fraunhofer Institute of Building Physics. Before we start the webinar, I have a few things we need to be aware of. We would really like you to ask questions. However, please don't unmute yourself during the presentation. Go down to the end of the screen and then type in, like click on the chat button, and then you are able to write in your questions. I can see that some of you already start typing. I hope that everyone can hear me. Can you hear me? Hello?
Yes, we can.
Oh, perfect. Oh, with that in mind, then I'll give the first presenter the word, and that's Zachary Davis.
Hi. Thank you, Nina, for a nice introduction. Hello, everybody. My name is Zachary Davis. Let me just get to the next one. I am coordinating the LibEd project, and I'm also a team manager at the Danish Technological Institute, leading a group working within printed and embedded electronics. What I'm going to talk about today is, in my half of this next hour, is about basically the innovation testbed itself, how it works, and the technologies involved. So it's about the innovation testbed for the development and production of the nanomaterials and processes for lightweight embedded electronics. But before I start to talk, I want to actually do a little poll. We have two questions, and this is just to get to know the audience a little bit better. And I would like to know, do you have experience with the printed electronics, and do you work currently with printed electronics? And I guess I can also answer the poll myself. So yes and yes. Please do that now. So I just want to see, who am I talking to? Are we talking with people that don't know anything about the subject, or are we talking to people that have some knowledge about printed electronics? Now, Nina is looking into the poll results, and then hopefully have some interesting, yeah, okay. So it seems that a lot of people have experience with printed electronics, 70%. And actually, and quite a few of you are also working with printed electronics, which is 58%. But there are, of course, some people that either have not any experience and actually not working with, which is actually what I sort of expected, that a lot of people here are interested in hearing about it because they work within the field. However, I was also hoping there will be a lot of people that are interested and curious about printed and embedded electronics, and that's really happy to see that. So with that, I'll go start my presentation, and the first thing I'm going to talk about is a little bit what is printed electronics, because now I know a little bit of you that, and I was sort of counting on that, doesn't know everything about printed electronics. So what are we talking about when we talk about printed and embedded electronics? So the idea is that we are looking, if we look in the traditional way to electronics, we have this is basically a standard printed circuit board, a PCB board we call it, which consists of a rigid substrate, in this case FR4 or something similar. And then we have a process where we then deposit layers of metal and then do a lithography process, etch the metal into a specific pattern, deposit a new layer of either dielectric, etc. So you're sort of stacking layer on layer and doing a lithography process every time you're defining your patterns. So you get a sort of a stack of electronics, which is consisting of etched metallic traces and on top of this rigid printed board. And you can also, in the end, you can then mount different components, passives and active components. And you can see there's a battery on there, etc. There's a lot of different things. It's very traditional. It's been working for many years, but it has some disadvantages. It's very bulky. It's not flexible. It's difficult to integrate and put into a lot of different, for example, clothing or other things. We'll have examples of that. It's a little bit cumbersome. So what we're looking into when we're talking about printed and embedded electronics is going from something that's more bulky and standard to something that looks a little bit like this, where we have a flexible substrate. In this case, it's a PET foil, a plastic foil, and we are then printing the layers directly on top of the foil. And then we can print several layers, conductive, dielectric, and even sensing layers in some cases. We can add a flexible battery, in this case, the white part. And you also see that we can then also mount components as well. In this case, we try to make it smaller, more agile components. But in this case, we have the same thing. This is actually a temperature logging system, which has an NFC reading capability in both cases. So it's the same actual device, just two different versions of it. One using traditional technology, other using printed technology. And of course, there's other advantages to printed electronics. As I just explained to you, I would say the manufacturing process, because in the one case, you're then depositing and then doing lithography and etching, whereas in the print process, you're actually printing. So in this case, it's a more simple and potential faster and more cheap manufacturing process. The other thing is that you can make use of mass production lines, roll-to-roll print lines, and actually there's quite a few of those around the world producing other things like graphics, but you can then convert these to actually start to produce electronic components. When you start to do this, then you can actually start to make a very cheap and also high volume production of these electronic components. And the last but not least is the sort of what you could do with these printed technologies is work with a variety of different substrates. You're not confined to this FR4, or these rigid substrates anymore. You can then build electronics directly on paper, plastic foils, even textiles in some cases. So actually start to integrate and put electronics exactly where you want them to have, and that has a huge benefit. About the printed components, so what about, we have a lot of printing tools, and this has been around for a while, but actually right now, if you look about the types of components and things that can be printed, I mean, we're not talking about just simple electronic traces or PCB boards, but we're also talking about, antennas, temperature sensors, humidity sensors, pressure sensors, touch sensing. There's also a lot of development and I would say more in the research, but also components and products coming out with gas and biosensors. Batteries, I showed you an example just before on the previous slide. Photodetector solutions, a lot of things can now be printed and are being developed using printing technologies. So once you combine all these tools together, which is of course, different materials, different processes, then you start to realize how big of an impact these technologies are going to have. And just to name a few different applications, areas, IoT, Internet of Things, which is a huge application base right now. A lot of work being done within trying to, you know, I mean, there's a lot of course, IoT kits out there, but through printed electronics, you can enable cheaper, more sustainable ID tags. And if you can then add functionalities like sensing, then you can actually start to do monitoring applications like environmental monitoring, structural monitoring, buildings, all sorts of different things start to rise up. So there's a huge application base here. If we go into the smart packaging, is also another huge application base. Just using a simple tag, you can do. You can imagine logistics, so things that you can easily scan electronically and keep and make sure you know where your packages are. But of course, again, as soon as we can add more functionalities, more sensing into the components, we can then think of anti-counterfeiting, quality freshness control. So actually, you buy a piece of meat or salad and you know that it's actually good and it's not going bad. This is some of the things that are coming in the future. And this is just some examples of that. Last but not least, the last thing I want to talk about is just a little bit about e-health. E-health is also a becoming application area. So in this case, glucose sensor. I mean, you can actually already buy a patch that sort of you put on your arm and then measures your blood sugar levels throughout the day, and then puts that, uploads that to your telephone or whatever handheld wireless device. EKG patches, so having patches that can monitor your vital signs, etc. Fever monitoring for babies, infants, stuff like that. There's already actually quite a few products on the market, and are all being enabled through printed and embedded electronic processes technologies. So one of the things that, of course, there's a lot of examples and a lot of things coming out every day, but one of the main barriers without, for especially small and medium-sized companies and enterprises is how do we get expertise? How do we get access to the technologies that they might have a great idea, but how do we get access to these technologies and people that know about this in order to bring my idea to life? And that's where we came up with the LeBed, and that's the sort of the solution for this. LeBed is an ecosystem, or what we call an innovation test bed, for the development and production of both the materials, but also the processes for the lightweight embedded electronics industry. So through LeBed, the main concept is we have what we call a single entry point, a SEP. Through that single entry point, we bring in the stakeholders, the customers or clients. Right now, this single entry point is a website, www.lebed.eu. Once you get into through the single entry point and sign up, you go through 3 basic phases. The first phase is more a techno sort of a modeling where we take the technologically, we take a look at the technology and the economics within your idea. What can we provide of services? What can we do for you? And we do some services that tell you, yes, we can do this, or no, we can't, or what can we do? Once we get into that sort of desktop phase, we go into what we call a pilot project in phase 2. Phase 2 is extremely exciting because then you get access to both the pilot lines we have available, and we have quite a few, which I'll talk about in a few minutes. Once we do this pilot project, we have then done work for the customer or the client. Then we also want to ensure that they can use the results and take them to market. And that's what we do through a phase 3, which is knowledge transfer, where we take the results from the pilot project and then try to figure out what's the next steps. So basically what LeBed is a one-stop shop for stakeholders needing expertise and infrastructure access within embedded and printed electronics. Just to show you a little bit about the people involved, the people behind the scenes. I'm not going to go into detail about all the partners, but we actually have 13 service and pilot line providers. And this is distributed within 7 EU countries. And here you can see a sort of a diagram of which partners are involved in which of the phases. We also have in the LeBed project right now 4 end user cases, which are representing 4 very, very different application areas. We have Swarovski. Swarovski is actually quite interested in trying how to improve the functionalities of their jewelry, and so what they're wanting in this case is sort of we're developing of course several different things. One of the things is sort of a smart intelligent services where we can embed these crystals that they make with some sort of touch interaction, lighting interaction. We have Maya, which is actually representing the automotive industry. They are manufacturing or do the process optimization for manufacturing the plastic parts inside the car and also outside the car, automotives. So what we're trying to do for them is make processes that can embed electronics inside the plastic parts for touch interaction and lighting, for example. Then we have Grafietic, which is a Spanish company working with the label industry. So in this case, we're working with smart labels, as we discussed before, integrating sensing and electronic functionalities into the labels that are being put onto products. And then last but not least, we have Acciona, which is a construction company in Spain. And there we're actually looking at how to embed structural monitoring inside in this case, composite-based elements that they're building, and also how to monitor the production processes in their production plants. So there's a few things there where printed and embedded electronics are extremely useful. So now that we know a little bit about how do we get started, and as I mentioned before, it's all happening through what we call the single entry point, the SCP. Right now, the single entry point is a website, www.libed-bed.eu. Here you can actually find a lot of information about Libed project, who's involved, the partners, the services, pilot lines. You can also read a little bit about the end user cases, etc. But the most important part is the sign-up page. The sign-up page is where you get started with Libed. So you click on the sign-up, and then you, of course, fill out it takes about 5 minutes, if not even that, who you are, etc. And maybe just a few small, short details about what you're interested in. And also what we call, and we're also quite interested in where is it, what type of idea do you have? Is it a basic idea? Do you have a proof of concept? Or are we on, and where do you want to go? Do you want to go to a prototype, or do you want to go to a pilot production? These are all interesting things. And actually it's also all things that we can do, services we can provide within Libed. So, but of course it helps us to ascertain who is going to take charge of you as a client when you go through the single entry point. Just something a little bit about the phases and also the pilot lines in the next part. Right now we have these 3 phases. The first phase I'm not going to talk too much about because my colleague Tobias is going to talk more about that in the second part of the webinar today. But here is just a little bit about the services involved in the Techno economic assessment, phase 1. If we go into the phase 2, which I was thinking is the sort of, I would say this is where you get the access to the technology. We have 3 types of the pilot lines. We have a nanomaterial pilot lines, we have nano-enabled formulation pilot lines, and we have component pilot lines. If we look into the sort of nanomaterial services and pilot lines, we have DTI ourselves and also VS Particles involved in this. In this case, we're working with a few different things. One of the things we're trying to work a lot on in developing is rapid screening technologies for basically decreasing the development time of new materials or existing materials that we need to modify to something that looks like under 3 months, because this is a huge bottleneck for us. I mean, making a half a year development time is for a lot of people unacceptable. So we're trying to develop screening technologies which can improve the time of development, so increase the time to market. In this case, just some examples of the nanomaterials, which of course you'll hear a lot more in the preceding webinars in the following weeks. We also can help with upscaling. So in this case, not just, we can do a development of a few grams, but on the other hand, we need to be able to scale up the production of these. So we actually do have services with how to scale up, and that is actually doing design and building of these fully automated reactors that can actually make these tons or kilos of nanomaterials a day. Last but not least, within this, we also have some new novel technologies of how to directly deposit in a gas phase different nanomaterials, and it could be single material or multi-materials on substrates in a direct writing fashion. And this is really nice for both screening, but also of discovering totally new types of nanomaterials that could be very advantageous to your products. The next type of the next pilot lines we have are the formulation or the nano-enabled formulation pilot lines. Here we have CPI, Acciona, and RISE working on these. We have, I would say, the backbone of any sort of formulation work is actually through high throughput screening. In this case, we have a lot of work within robotic mixing and testing systems, and which is then basically taking, supports design of experiments and principal component analysis, where we can then take a large round of, we have a lot of components that can make up a formulation. We can mix and match them, test different solvents, test different additives, etc., trying to optimize those formulations for exactly that print process or that application that we need. And this is an extremely powerful tool, and it really, really saves time and shortens the time to market on a lot of these materials that we're making. Through this, we're working, of course, with a lot of inks, adhesives, and composites, a lot of different types. And these are, of course, coming from the nanomaterials we're working with. They're coming into the formulation, and then we're trying to formulate different types of inks, adhesives, and composites that can then be put into the component pilot lines, which are coming up next. And then, of course, we have the component pilot lines. We actually have quite a few partners involved to this, which we have CPI, Acciona, RISE, DTI, TNO, and TU Eindhoven. A lot more information is going to come in their webinar at the end of the month, but just to have a little bit of a teaser, we have also a lot of different types of pilot lines. We have sort of prototyping components where we can use, for example, sheet-to-sheet inkjet, digital inkjet technology to prototype different types of electronic components and sensors. We also have multi-material 3D printing lines, which we can actually build in a 3D printer, multi-material printer electronics circuits. We also have, of course, the roll-to-roll lines, which is more for upscaling different processes. And in this case, we're working on roll-to-roll inkjet pilot lines. We have also an IoT pilot line, which consists of printing lines, mounting lines, and also conversion lines. And we also have smart packaging pilot lines, which work specifically on packaging materials. In order to really support all these pilot lines, we also have activities within inline monitoring, and this is done through Fraunhofer and CList. In this case, they're working a lot with non-destructive online monitoring technologies, which can support both the nanomaterial, the formulation, and of course the component pilot lines. So trying to get in there and actually really get fast online feedback to the production of a lot of these components and all of these materials, etc. This is what we're working on. The last thing I want to talk about is the phase 3. In the phase 3, we're talking about how to take the pilot line information or the pilot projects and then go to help, sort of transfer that knowledge to the client. And then in this case, we're talking about IPR, patenting, standardization, safety, business planning, and of course, investor capital. These services are actually still under development, and more information about that probably in a later stage of the LeadBid project. And just to end this part of the webinar and go through some questions, just a little bit about the timeline and the major goal of LeadBid. Right now, we're in the development phase of the pilot lines and services. This is actually starting to, within the next year, we're starting to finalize a lot of the services and also the pilot lines. So actually, in the middle of next year, we're going to open LeadBid to the public, and then ask for companies to come and have to go through the single entry point, and have a sort of get access to our services and pilot lines. In this case, we're going to run 10 free phase 1 assessments within 2021-2022. By 2022, the end of the project, we actually have to demonstrate feasibility and sustainability of the LeadBid concept. That means we need to show that this is giving added value to the European industry. So with that, I want to say thank you very much, and then I guess we do have a little bit of time for some questions. So is anybody have any questions? Please write in the chat, and I can answer that. Are there any questions yet? It's so clear. There's nothing. At any time, I mean, when you guys have a question, just write it in the chat, and we could take it also at the end of the second part. So with that, I'll say thank you very much for your attention, and I'll give the word back to Nina.
Yes, and thank you for the very nice presentation. And yeah, we'll go to the second part, and this part will be held by Tobias Printer, and I guess I'll give the word to him.
So thank you very much, Nina, and thank you very much, Zachary, for the introductory part to Libet. I am going to talk a bit more in detail about the phase 1 assessment that Zach already briefly mentioned. As soon as I can control the slides, we'll get right started. Let me tell you a bit about myself first. My name is Tobias Prenzel. I'm working for Fraunhofer Institute for Building Physics in Stuttgart, Germany. And I'm involved in the environmental assessment of printed electronics. And within the Libet project, I'm acting as a project manager, and we're coordinating the phase 1 assessment, which is why I'm also presenting on the behalf of the other partners that are involved in the different assessments that we run. Basically, talking about what the phase 1 assessment is, Zachary already mentioned that especially if you don't have a high level of knowledge on printed electronics yet, it might be a bit confusing and difficult to get started in printed electronics. And answering that question that he already posed, how do I get access to printed electronics? And to make that access easier, we started providing the different services, and the phase 1 assessment is really the initial starting point when you access the Libet single entry point where you can get more information. Can we just quickly check, Zachary, that you give me the control over the presentation again, because right now I cannot flip slides. Now it seems to be working. Okay, so talking about the Libet phase 1 assessment today, I will show you how it is the tailored assessment to basically go from an idea in printed or embedded electronics and move it towards a feasible concept that can lead to either pilot line use for first prototypes, or really a series production in the ramp-up phase in phase 2. What we always intend to do with the phase 1 assessment is that we really give you precise information on different relevant aspects for your idea, to quickly tell you if the idea is feasible and what might be the barriers in achieving your goals, and also preparing the phase 2 and phase 3 so that we do not only in theory prove the concept, but also put it into practice and have a knowledge transfer in the end that enables you as customers to later use what we've been developing here. Talking a bit more in detail, we have 3 main benefits for you that make it really easy to access printed electronics and to get started in it. And I think the core of that is the large number of partners we have involved here that have years of experience in printed electronics, be it in the development of nanomaterials, in the formulation, in producing components, or evaluating them. So we have partners on board from really a wide set of different backgrounds. And this enables us to provide that kind of one-stop shop that Zachary was mentioning in the beginning, to really get you started at one single point, and you know that all the information that you need will come from one hand, and we can provide all that. This obviously makes it very easy to use for you, so you don't have to search for different companies, for different providers for services. We can follow through the entire development phase from the idea generation in a certain industry to really putting out prototypes and small series production and transferring the knowledge to you. What additionally to that really stands out for the phase 1 assessment is that we developed a workflow that makes it really fast and gives you the chance to review the results we create in one matter. So there's not 5 different templates, and we're not going to present you a lot of different confusing information, but we'll put it together and you will just receive one result that will give you a holistic view on the idea you have. Talking a bit more in detail, this is the different services that we offer. There's 8 partners involved in the services. We heard before that there's a wide set of different nations represented in the consortium, and also different backgrounds. We really have the key experts here at your disposal for assessing the technical, the economic, safety, sustainability, intellectual property sides of your project. And what we also offer is a pilot project funding support. So if you know that you would like to run a project and you might not have the funds to get started there, we can support you also with national contacts to give you an idea where to get funding from for conducting such a project. As you can see that for most of the services, we have different partners cooperating here. So it's also you benefit from experience from different entities that work together in achieving your goals here. So what I want to do for the rest of the webinar is basically give you an insight into each of these different services. And then I want to talk about one of our internal industrial clients that has been working in close cooperation with us, which is Acciona. Zachary already mentioned that in the beginning, that they're working in the construction sector. And I'd like to give you an idea how a customer journey could look when you're participating in the LEBED phase 1. So first and foremost, I think the most important is if you have an idea that could be addressed by printed and embedded electronics is to see, is it technically feasible? So we really start with that simple or not so simple question with that you're just getting a yes or no, so a simple answer if it's technically feasible, but also we're trying if we see barriers that might prohibit you from really achieving that goal to search for alternatives and to find ways to achieve your goals, probably with a different strategy of approaching that. But the key outcome definitely is the evaluation of the technical feasibility in that service. Besides that, obviously it's very important that if we say it's technically feasible, to assess if there's a certain risk associated to the technical development. This might, for example, be if you need a new nanomaterial, if you need to combine devices or components in one device that haven't been used together before, there's certain risks. We try to mitigate them already in the first assessment before starting to trial out what is possible. Obviously, parts of it just need to be tested. That's what phase 2 is there for. But the risk level can be determined already in the beginning. What makes it easy for you to use is that we have a data collection for all the services within the technical assessment. This is why we run the technical assessment first before conducting the other services. Primarily, you'll know if the idea is technically feasible, so if it can be pursued. It doesn't make much sense to assess it from an environmental perspective, for example. You already know it's technically not feasible. But for you, it makes it easier if we just collect data for all services at once. You will have contact with one project manager only that helps you through the service, and that makes it just easy to use for you. What is another outcome of the technical assessment is that we assign what capabilities we're using for the pilot project. So you've heard a bit about the variety of different technologies, of different materials that we have. And obviously with all the different partners, it is in the beginning for you, it might be confusing which technology to choose. So that's why we provide within the technical assessment, the information, what technologies, what materials, and also probably what off-the-shelf components will be used in producing the pilot products that you want to try out. So all in all, you'll know if the idea is technically feasible and at what risk, and the other service providers internally will have the data they need for processing your idea in the field of printed and embedded electronics. The service is conducted by TPU, the Danish Technological Institute, and CPI. And we also get involved, the partners that are running the pilot lines, for seeing which pilot line might be the appropriate one. Looking into the economic assessment, this assessment is going to be divided into two smaller parts. So there is one part that really just looks at the economic feasibility within the scope of what you defined previously. So if you define a maximum cost per device, this is something that we will check before running the other services in line with the technical assessment. We're also looking into the economic risk. We will start looking into a business model and how that could look with the devices that you're producing. And you will also learn more about the material costs and supplies benchmarking through that assessment, which is run by Sustainable Innovation and Acciona Innovation. And basically for you, the outcome is it within the scope of what you set for the financial benchmarks, and also is it attached to, or is there any risks that are relevant for you in conducting those or in going for that business? We also know that it's sometimes difficult to know what new regulations and rules apply, especially if you're treating with nanomaterials in your companies, or if you have any devices that contain nanomaterials. That's why Acciona is providing a preliminary safety screening, which includes all the regulatory aspects about nanomaterials over the entire product life cycle. So this means from development through production, the use phase, and also at the end of life. We also provide a risk management for regulatory risks. And we're looking into toxicology, ecotoxicology of all the materials that are used. Another thing that I mentioned in the beginning already is that the exposure to nanoparticles, especially if you're handling them in your companies, for example, if you put that in a streamlined production line, and you, for example, want to have nano-enabled inks in there, then the exposure will be determined by Acciona as well. So in the end, you will definitely know what the relevant regulatory and safety related information is, and you will get access to that through an open platform for everyone that ran the phase 1 assessment, where you can also see the differences of regulations applying for different industries and industry branches. The next service is the one we at Fraunhofer IBP provide, which is the life cycle assessment. So in that assessment service, we're looking into the sustainability of printed electronics, and we identified two important metrics for that, where we say the impact categories of climate change and resource use are probably the most discussed at the moment and the most relevant for printed electronics, as in regular or in conventional electronics, you have a lot of etching processes and a lot of rinsing processes in between in the production, which you don't have in printed electronics. So that is a huge difference on the aspects of climate change. For the resource use, obviously, when we're using silver or copper nanoparticles, this is a critical point as well, which especially at the end of life, so when your device becomes scrap, is going to be critical, and we're going to look into that, but also how a potential device could impact your use phase. So if you have a product that is influenced by attaching or integrating printed electronics, this is something we're going to look into briefly as well. In the end, we want you to know about the environmental hotspots and the potential implications that the product we're developing for you is going to have on the entire life cycle. Last but not least, we're looking into a pattern mapping. So this is performed by DTI and Acciona Innovation. And the most important here is to just understand what the landscape is for the type of product that you're developing. So we're looking into relevant and related patterns. We're going to assess competition that exists, so different technologies and product trends. We will regard the geographic context So if it's something that is relevant for your country or for your region, and we will also map out what competitors and maybe even potential partners exist in the market that are also concerned with those topics. At the end, you will know your competition a lot better. You will know some restrictions and also your unique selling points. As we perform that patent mapping in the beginning, in the phase 1 assessment, you won't have a freedom to operate in the end, because the device design will most likely be adapted a bit in phase 2 still. But what we don't do in the phase 1 assessment will follow in the phase 3, where we have the knowledge transfer. So this is something that is just happening a little bit later for you. The most important, I think, is that at the end of performing all those services, you have a really holistic view on what your idea looks like, what is the barriers in producing that, and what is also the outlines, be it in a legal, be it in a patent context, or in sustainability, obviously also techno and economic wise. So I mentioned that briefly before. I was talking about how the phase 1 works. We start at the single entry point. So you have the registration that Zachary was talking about on the webpage www.libet.eu. And the first thing that is going to happen when we review your idea is that we will assign a project manager to your case. This will most likely be someone from the phase 2, the pilot line operators, if we can already identify that it might be an interesting project for that pilot line. So we will have someone who is very competent in that field and who will follow you through the development stages. So you have one contact to exchange your ideas with and to give and get feedback from. After assigning the project manager, we will start, as I said, with the technical feasibility and the quick financial decision support. So this is basically the go or no-go decision in the beginning. If we happen to find out that the idea is either technically not feasible or doesn't work in the budget that you're envisioning, then we'll go back to thinking about different use cases, different applications, or maybe adapting the technology together with you. Once we clear out that the technical feasibility and the quick financial decision support has a positive result, we go to the step 4, where we perform all the other services on safety, lifecycle assessment, intellectual property, and the full economic viability assessment. And what I said before already is that we will compile one report. So even though there's a lot of different partners involved and a lot of expertise going in there, you will just get one compiled final report document that will tell you all about the limitations and the opportunities that you have. With that final report document, you can start in phase 2, and we can really put the ideas and the developed system architecture into a prototype. So by the end of the phase 1, you will have a device design that will tell you which materials might be likely used, which off-the-shelf components might be used, and maybe which components will have to be developed within the project. Now, having explained a bit what the phase 1 assessment in general looks like, I want to go a bit into how we can look for a real customer, because I think it's a lot more understandable what it means if you can see what the customer idea is and how we can advance that through providing the service. When Acciona joined the consortium in the beginning, obviously they're working with a lot of cutting edge technologies, but they haven't been into printed electronics that deeply. So for them, it was basically an open play field in seeing what they can achieve through printed electronics. For those of you who do not know Acciona, Acciona Construction is a pioneer in the use of fiber reinforced composite materials, and they apply them in a wide range of different applications, such as bridges, lighthouses, breakwaters, and other infrastructures. Their main objective in Libet is to design sensors for various representative cases in the construction sector. So they were just thinking about where they could use some sensing capabilities and where it would make sense to try realizing that through printed electronics. There's mainly two desired functionalities that Zachary mentioned in the beginning already. So they have one on the production plant where they're producing the fiber reinforced composites, which is asset tracking and quality control really in the production line. And then the second case is structural health monitoring, where offsite, for example, on a structure like that lighthouse that you can see in the picture, just gets a health monitoring that is working online and live, and you can just see materials fatigue in the structures by sensing via printed electronics. The case I want to talk about a bit more is the first one. So this one is about monitoring ambient temperature and humidity, structure deformation and vibration during the production of fiber reinforced composites. And the idea was to have embedded devices here that are single use, and you activate them and place them on the fibers or fabrics before they enter inside the mold where the fiber reinforced part is really manufactured. And obviously, we start at the beginning by taking up some customer requirements. And in that case, I think one of the most important to be stated is that this is a heavy industrial environment, and there's some environmental conditions that just need to be taken into account when thinking about applying printed electronics here. So first and foremost, if it goes into the parts themselves, it has to be compatible with resins and has to be resistant to all the chemicals that are used in that process and the process conditions that are applied to the device, to the composites that are being manufactured. We also have a few numbers given from Acciona, which was, for example, a cost limit. We have a time span for the data point collection. We have a temperature range, and we also have that pressure range that needs to be survived by the device. So we don't want any failure rates in the device while we're monitoring our composites. And that's why we need to stay within those lines of the customer requirements. Generally speaking, this will be the same for all the different use cases. So also for the other partners that we have in the project, what we start with is really taking up customer requirements so we understand better what is the idea and what might be the possible solutions we can apply to get there. As I said, the key material and functional challenges are that heavy industrial environments. Also, having a stable functionality in corrosive environments is something that can pose quite a challenge, and also the device design, because some of the electronics are not designed to be operating at the conditions that we're looking into. We're currently in phase 2. We're trying to see how far we can go beyond the specification as well. And we're looking into developing conformable coatings for having the devices shielded a bit from those conditions around them. So basically, if you look at the customer journey in the beginning, they had an initial idea. We were talking about the idea with the project manager assigned to Acciona. We collected requirements and we started the technical assessment, and soon found out that there are some limits that might cause device failure. And obviously that is not what we want to have as an outcome for our service. So what we did instead is we took another iteration. We went back to another brainstorming with the project manager and adapted the initial idea. So the technical assessment had a result that was positive, and we're quite confident trying out in phase 2 now what can be achieved here, but we could provide all the services, and we're starting with the prototype development now. So if we're looking at the conclusions, we found that it's technically and economically feasible at a medium development risk. That medium risk mainly results from the trials that still have to be performed. I mean, on the right-hand side, you can already see that we started producing the first prototypes. This is a printed electronic circuit embedded in some of the resins that might be used. But still, there's a certain risk that we defined and that we want to mitigate in the phase 2 by finding out what we need to adapt the device to really survive those conditions. We also looked into relevant aspects regarding safety, sustainability, and intellectual property. This is very case specific, so I'm not going to go very much into detail there. Basically, what you can expect here is that regarding the safety, there will be some outcomes telling you what is the relevant aspects that you have to look into, but also some suggestions what further safety assessments might be conducted in the future. For the sustainability, we could identify the most critical components for the CO2 footprint and also for resource use, and intellectual property assessment gave us an idea on what are the current patents that are in that field, what might be conflicting, and how the idea differs from other ideas and has its own unique selling point. Overall, we don't see any critical obstructions for the successful implementation, and that's why, as I just said, we're already working on phase 2 and really trying to put that into functional devices. So, summing up what the phase 1 is, we have an understanding that the objectives and the prior knowledge differs very, very significantly between the different customers that might approach us. I mean, we've seen that in the beginning of the webinar that some of you said they're working with printed electronics and they have previous knowledge. Some of you, however, might not. And I think that is really great about how we designed the phase 1, is that at any stage of development, be it I have an idea that might be a possible application for printed and embedded electronics, to I have that material and I really want to scale it up and I want to try out if it works in a mass production as well. We can cover all that, and I think especially since the services are so highly adaptable, we can not only cover different levels of knowledge, but also all different industries that you might be coming from. So you've seen with the 4 partners that we have already involved here, we have from decorative surfaces to smart labeling, to construction, to process monitoring, to automotive sector. We really cover a wide variety of different industries already, and we definitely can adapt our services or use our services for a wide range of other industries as well. And what for you gives the best benefits basically is that the large number of stakeholders that are involved in DBET, they really can work out the solution that fits your ideas best and that can help you getting started in printed electronics by just talking to our experts and seeing what is the different options that you have and what is the one fitting your ideas and your business strategy best. And the easy thing for you to use is that you really just have to contact one single entity. So we have the single entry point on our website. And as soon as you get started there, we will take care of the rest and match you up with the partners that are most suitable for your case. And last but not least, obviously you don't want to wait for a long time to see if an idea is feasible or not. So what we're working on, or what we've been working out, is that there's a designated fast fail if the technical feasibility is not given, which means that once we see that there's a technical limitation that cannot be overcome, we'll get directly back to you and we're going to adapt the idea as happened for the Acciona case, for example. And we're looking into how can we make your idea a success after all, even though some limitations might be there and might be difficult to overcome on the material or component level. So this was my contribution to today's webinar. I hope I could give you a nice little look into what the phase 1 assessment can do for you. Obviously, if you want to get to know more about it, we're happy to receive your emails or calls. There's the contact to us is on the last slide of this presentation. But for now, I'd be really interested in seeing what questions you have to me or to Zachary, who presented the first part. Thank you very much.
Tobias. Thank you very much, Tobias, for your presentation. And please, again, if you have any question, please go down to the bottom on your screen, click on the chat button and write in your question. We already got some questions. The first question is from Alexander, and he writes, I'm actually curious about the single entry part. What about career opportunities for researchers and engineers?
That's a great question. So I can try to, the short question is, I mean, the whole idea of building up these infrastructures and services is to get, you know, traction within Europe, within printed electronics. So of course, one of the more longer term goals is that, you know, we build these technologies up, and then we also need qualified engineers and researchers that can work within these technologies as well, bringing new things into the pilot lines, new materials, new ideas, new processes. So of course, this is one of the also, you know, sort of longer term goals within LeapEd, is that we actually, you know, when we grow a business, when we grow a section, and that these things will then of course go hand in hand.
Yes, I hope that was the answer for Alexander. We have another question from another Alexander, who's asking, who is owning the right to the idea and later production process after phase 2 and 3? Will there be made any publication on the results?
That's a really good question, and it's something we are discussing quite a lot. So in principle, once you enter the single entry point, you'll have the option of signing an NDA with the LeapEd single entry point. This NDA will then of course protect your you know, the information or the ideas that you have, and of course all the technologies. The actual IP or the intellectual property generated through LeapEd is, I would say, of course it's a negotiation, but I would say in principle, how it usually works with a lot of the research and technology organizations, that, you know, things that we invent, it belongs to the RTO, and then of course as a company that's paying for these services, you have first right for the licensing of that. But of course these are questions that we're discussing, and, you know, and it's also usually on a case by case basis that we discuss these IPR issues, how these are working out. But, you know, this is sort of the general way things will work. Not to say that's the rules, but that's sort of a general way right now. Mm-hmm.
Yes, we have another question. For the safety risk assessment, will they be made for each region, or do you go by European standard?
Another good question, and actually we do have an answer for that.
Yeah, and we will go by the EU regulation and the OECD guidelines for risk assessments.
There we go. We got that directly from the service provider, Acciona. So thank you very much for providing the answer.
Yeah, and we have a question from Hazel. How long do the phase 3 typically take?
So from 1 to 3, the whole thing, or just
no, only the 3 phases. Yeah, sorry, okay. All 3.
That's a really good question. I'm saying so the phase 1 and the phase 3 are going to be more standardized. In that case, if we're looking in phase 1, and maybe this is something also we're discussing, but we're trying to create I mean, and maybe correct if you have some input, Tobias, please say so. I think it's between around 2 to 4 weeks is what we're trying to sort of is the time scale for those services, the phase 1 services. And
well,
yeah, sorry.
bit. It depends a bit on what complexity level we're looking into, and
Of course.
when you sign up at the single entry point, you will have that selection where you are with your idea and where you want to go, and depending on that, also the level of complexity. I think that's for all three phases will vary a bit. So we have a certain variation in there. I think the most complex we've been looking into for phase one was close to 3 months, but I think that's more the exception. We can definitely see very short responses. If it's something that is either very close to standard products that we already developed somewhere, or if it is just the transfer of an idea from one industry branch to another, that, for example, would be a very fast assessment.
Yeah, exactly. And I think also in general, one of the sort of main goals of the LIBE is to try to reduce, also when we're going to the pilot projects, to try to reduce the different, development stages. For example, I mentioned that, trying to develop new materials within a few months, 2 to 3 months, etc. So I think a pilot project can vary depending on the complexity, as Tobias also mentioned, from maybe a few months to maybe a half a year, something in this area, depending, of course, a lot on the engagement and also the basic the complexity of the project.
Yes, and we have another question from Yas. I hope I pronounced that correctly. Is it possible for startup to gain access to the pilot production lines?
Of course, most definitely. That's the whole idea. Through signing up to the single entry point, and that's sort of the way you start. So sign up, we get back to you within very quickly. Then we start to get, so basically the idea is then we will send you, we need some information about the idea, and we start to see what we can do. We go to the phase one, and through the phase one, you get to the pilot lines. And of course, that's so, yes, definitely. And of course, as I mentioned before, if you need funding for pilot projects, this is something we will also look into and try to provide some assistance and try to find, because I mean, at the end of the day, the sustainability of LIBE depends on the fact that most of us are either companies or research and technology organizations. That means we do not get funding from we do get a little bit of base funding, but actually the more commercial activities is driven through commercial payment. So we need to be able to procure funding for those type of projects, depending on what type it is. And of course, we have a lot of experience. I mean, we are actually geared to this type of trying to find funding for different types of projects. Yeah.
Yes, thank you. And we got another question from, a third Alexander. That's a very popular name today. Why you choose step-by-step pipeline approach for development with phases and not an agile process? From my experience, flexible electronic and printed electronic have almost the same complexity and production step, up to 50 plus steps. Are you planning to manage this type of production around country or make worth time and resources?
That's a really good question. I mean, so once we get into the pilot projects, I think that's what you're referring to, the pilot projects. I mean, the pilot projects themselves are going to be, so what you do is as Tobias said, you get assigned a project manager, and that project manager will be probably heading from one of these large RTOs, which has the infrastructure. However, a lot of it's going to be a collaborative process through, several RTOs, because not one RTO has all the technologies and all the know-how to make it very complex. So through the project manager, they will then, of course, make a plan for the development and or whatever upscaling project for the customer. In this case, it's going to be extremely, very agile. It's not just that we do this and this and this. It's every project is going to be unique. We know this. So, and that's going to be up to the project manager. And then we also have, of course, some internal tools that will help us do project management to sort of make a very specific project for each and every customer individually. Yes. So that's and then also even in the phase one, I mean, some of the things are, as Tobias said, we need to do a technical assessment, otherwise we cannot figure out what to do. But of course, some of the other things are you know, they're sort of they will take a little bit longer. So they're sort of they're there if we need them. So the whole system is agile.
Yes, we have another question from Carlos. Is the project open to evaluate new nanomaterial to be integrated in the representative developments, or is it limited to final product developments on a defined set of technologies? I represent another OITB, and we are interested in evaluating some materials we are producing in these applications.
Oh yeah, I mean, great question again. And I think a lot of these questions will probably be taken in when we discuss the different pilot lines themselves. But yes, definitely. I mean, we are also doing services within, for example, nanomaterials, both the development, but also characterization. We have a huge infrastructure for characterizing, you know, nanomaterials, and we have a huge, I mean, and that's of course one of the sort of standard services that will come out that we have during these is, you know, just standard, because we use that to develop our own materials, right? So no, it's not standard materials that will be then run out. I mean, in principle, if we see the need for a new material, or we can bring a material in from another, you know, a third party, then we'll do that. We're already discussing with other people, other companies working with nanomaterials, because it's a huge market right now and a growing market. And we can't do everything ourselves. So in that case, we can also bring in third parties, sort of subcontract them in towards they could do something that we cannot, of course. There's always this option. So it's an extremely flexible system in that way. And of course, doing the characterization and benchmarking, etc. This is, of course, some of the standardized services we'll have along the entire value chain within the nanomaterials themselves, in the formulations, and also the components.
Yes, I think we are through with the question I have got. If you have any question, please write it now before I close down. Before I close down, I would like to add that please remember that next week we are also hosting a webinar. Again, it's a Tuesday at 2 o'clock Central European Time. And the next webinar will be about nanomaterial pilot lines. Yeah, it seems like we have covered all the questions.
Yeah.
So yeah, I don't know.
One more comment. So as Tobias stated as well, please don't wait. If you want to be a part of the of our community, please go. Either you can write to the libet@technologist.dk, or go through the Libet website as the single entry point and sign up. The more, and then of course, once you're on our communities or sort of list, then you get, of course, updates about things that are happening. You can get already in contact with some of our technologies that we're working with, if you have something specific in mind. So I would just urge you just not to wait and contact us right away, and let's start talking about what we can do for you. And with that, I'm finished. I don't have anything else to say. I don't know, Tobias, do you have any final words?
Thank you very much for tuning in today. I hope we see you in the next webinar next week. And I think there's a lot of things you can learn a bit more into detail about what we do in phase 2 and the different pilot lines that we're running and what the capabilities are, and also looking at the question how you could access them if you just have really specific questions that you want answered, and what type of cooperation we could have there. So thank you very much for your attendance, and hope to see you next week.
Yeah, thank you, Tobias. And I also want to thank Nina for you know, for arranging everything. She's been really good at also getting the word out. So yeah, I don't know if you have a few last comment before we finish.
No. I just hope to see everyone on Tuesday for the next webinar, and thank you for attending this webinar.
All right. Thank you very much, everybody. All right.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Goodbye. Have a nice evening.